What should be the Christmas of sports has finally come. We have reached March Madness. Welcome everybody to the Fumble Sports March Madness Conference Tournament pregame show. This is a conference tournament pick show. We're going to go through the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC, going through every game of those three conference tournaments, making selections, going through the bracket, giving you picks, and helping you prepare for March Madness Selection Sunday, only a few days away. So make sure you join us for the next hour or so. We're going to go through every game for the conference tournaments for the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC, answering all of your questions around the conference tournaments. Make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Fumble Sports is where you'll find us. And of course, Sports Fumble on Twitter. Appreciate all of you joining us. One more time, we're going to go through the conference tournaments for the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC, breaking down each matchup. We'll put out polls, have you guys vote on who you think's going to win each game, as well as give out our picks. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it in our bracket. Make sure you go to YouTube and check us out, Fumble Sports. You'll see our graphics, you'll see our brackets, as again, we go through the conference tournaments for the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC. And we start in the Big Ten. The first matchup comes on Wednesday. Ohio State, number 13 in the Big Ten tournament, facing number 12, Wisconsin. To give you guys some stats on that, Ohio State has a strength of schedule of 16. They are 64th in offensive rating in the country, so they're a better offensive team than defensive team. That said, this is a battle of two teams that are not very good in their Big Ten rating, standings all year. They've struggled at times. What really stands out to me, Wisconsin has lost these earlier matchups to Ohio. Wisconsin won the earlier matchups, rather, against Ohio State. So I do give Wisconsin the benefit here. I like how they play. They play within their style, within their tempo. They're not going to get rushed. So for many reasons, definitely feel like Wisconsin is the better play. We're going to do our first quick poll of the day. Hope you guys vote along with us. The first quick poll: who will win the first game of the Big Ten tournament? Smiley face if you think Ohio State. Crying face if you think Wisconsin. Doing our first quick poll one more time. Smiley face Ohio State. Crying face Wisconsin. Which team do you guys think is going to win the first game of the Big Ten tournament? I just gave out my pick. I like Wisconsin given their tempo and style of play. Let us know what you guys think. Ohio State or Wisconsin, which team do you guys think is going to win the first game of the Big Ten tournament? Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Hit that like button as well. That way you let others know about what's going on in the conversation. Not getting a lot of votes here. Well, I do like Wisconsin in this game. Like I mentioned, I think Greg Gard knows how to get his team, especially the guard position, no pun intended there, but knows how to get the guard position well prepared for conference tournament play. The guards for Wisconsin are going to be the most important players in this game in my expectation. So Hepburn, he's going to have a Chucky Hepburn. That's a guy I'm looking for. He averages 12.2 points per game, 2.9 assists. He's the leading assist getter for a Wisconsin team that should be better in that regard. So for a number of reasons, I do like Wisconsin to advance in the Big Ten tournament. Moving on to the next game that features Minnesota, the Minnesota Gophers, number 14 in the bracket, facing number 11 Nebraska. Minnesota, led by head coach Ben Johnson, has a strength of schedule that's 44th in the country. They are 346th in offensive rating, 317th in defensive rating. Speaks to where the Minnesota Golden Gophers are this year. They've really struggled this year. They are not a good team. And for a number of reasons, I think this will be a quick exit. When you just look at their past history against Nebraska, they lost on February 25th at Nebraska earlier this year. They played Nebraska in an overtime game January 7th. They also lost that one. So the fact that Nebraska is 2-0 on the year against Wisconsin gives me a lot of reason to like it. I like Nebraska in this game. I like Nebraska over the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Curious to know what you guys think. We won't do a quick poll now, but if you guys have comments about this game, make sure you throw them in the chat. Make sure you throw your comments in the chat. Answering any of your questions around the Big Ten tournament as we go through the entire bracket. We have given Wisconsin the win over Ohio State. We have given Nebraska the win against Minnesota. So those two teams advance as we now move on to Thursday's action. In the first game on Thursday, it features the Rutgers Scarlet Knights facing Michigan. Rutgers has been an up and down team this year. They were good early in the year, have faded towards the back half of the season, at least in the Big Ten standings. In strength of schedule, Rutgers is 53rd in the country. They are one of the best defenses in the country. Rutgers is 5th in the nation in defense. As for Michigan, they had a tough loss against the Indiana Hoosiers this past weekend, a loss that kind of put them on the outside of the bubble, probably looking in. They're 5th in the Big Ten standings, 17-14 record overall, 11-9. The offensive rating for this team, 121st. Defensive rating, 148th. For those who are interested, I have Michigan moving on in this one. I like Michigan over Rutgers. I like how Michigan's playing, especially how they get the ball inside to their big man, Hunter Dickinson. He has a great left-handed hook. I think they're going to do a good job of sucking the defense in around him and then finding shooters around the perimeter. For that reason, I like Michigan advancing over Rutgers. In the next game in the Big Ten tournament, number 12 Wisconsin, who we had advancing past the first round on Wednesday, faces Iowa, number 5 in the country. Iowa is a much deeper team. Wisconsin, again, that slow pace may cause problems for Iowa, at least trying defensively to control the game. But I really like Iowa in this one. They have a number of shooters, including the McCaffrey brothers. I think there's good opportunity for Iowa to not just get this win, but to build some momentum as they try to make a push, not only through the Big Ten tournament, but into the NCAA tournament. So for that reason, I love Iowa. I think Fran McCaffrey is a good coach. This is one in which Greg Gard is good. I like Fran McCaffrey more, not just his coaching style, but I certainly like the depth of his team, the number of scorers that he has. So for that reason, I do like Iowa advancing to the next round of the Big Ten tournament. The next game in the Big Ten tournament that we're going to talk about is number 10 Penn State against number 7 Illinois. Penn State, not usually thought of as a basketball powerhouse by any means, but they've actually been better this year than some people think. In their strength of schedule, 41st in the country. Their offensive rating is 47th. So they're a better offense than you might think. They actually have a number of double-digit scores. Jalen Pickett, 18 points per game, 7 assists per game, 7.3 rebounds per game. He's been one of the best players in the Big Ten this season. Jalen Pickett's definitely a player I'm going to keep my eye on in terms of if he has a good game, he could maybe push Penn State over the top against Illinois. But I think Illinois is just a deeper team overall. Brad Underwood's a really good coach. He's done a good job recruiting, and not just through high school. He was able to get a big win in the transfer portal when they got Matthew Mayer from Baylor to join their team. He's averaging 13 points this year, 5.4 rebounds. He's a great shooter from the outside, averaging when it comes to three-point range, 34% from three-point range, which is the best on the team. So I really like the Fighting Illini of Illinois. I know Penn State has their superstar, but I think the overall depth and quality of team that is Illinois will help them advance past Penn State to the next round of the Big Ten tournament. And then the last game of that second round, that Thursday slate of games for the Big Ten tournament, is number 11 Nebraska against number 6 Maryland. Now, we let Nebraska get through in the previous round, largely because of their success so far this year against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. They had gone 2-0 this year. But Maryland's a much different story. Maryland's a much better team. Strength of schedule, 45th in the country, 71st in offensive rating, 74th in defensive rating. That's always something I keep an eye on. is a team not overly strong in one area? Is there a level of balance? And you seem to get a little bit of that with Maryland. They're obviously a much better team at home. They did just play Penn State and Ohio State back-to-back losses to end their year, but both of those games were on the road. They've lost their last four road games, and that has me a little concerned about Maryland, given that this is a neutral site. But neutral site versus a true road game, I like Maryland's roster a lot more than I like Nebraska's. This is a game in which I would have my eye on just being slightly concerned that you could see Nebraska shoot a little bit better and make it more competitive. Maybe you like Nebraska on the spread, but I like Maryland to win and advance. That completes the second round of the Big Ten tournament, moving us into Friday of the Big Ten tournament. And the first game of that Friday round is number 8 Michigan, that we've advanced through past Rutgers, against number 1 Purdue. Purdue has been one of the best teams in the country throughout the year, at times a number 1 overall seed. They've fallen back over the last few weeks, a couple tough losses, including one to Indiana. But Michigan is a good team. They're not a great team. This will be Purdue's first game of the tournament. I don't expect Purdue to be a one-and-doner, so I like Purdue to win this game. Zach Edey, National Player of the Year, I think he deserves it. I think he's going to play a massive role both on the boards, but also being able to dictate. You're going to see a similar style. Hunter Dickinson of Michigan battling Zach Edey down low. I think Zach Edey gets the better of that matchup. I also think these teams have similar styles. They want to throw the ball into their big man down low, have him either score, facilitate, passing to shooters on the perimeter for a number of reasons. I like Purdue to advance in this game. So for that reason, Boilermakers get their first win in March. Should feel good about that. The next game of the Friday matchup of the Big Ten tournament is number 5 Iowa, that we've advanced through, against number 4 Michigan State. Michigan State is not the same quality of team that we've seen in years past. I understand that they've had an emotional ride over the last few weeks, but Tom Izzo's team is just not nearly as talented. Now, that said, Michigan State is 3rd in the country in strength of schedule, so they've had a challenging schedule. They've certainly been tested, but this team just isn't as good as in years past. Tyson Walker, Joey Hauser are the 2 big scorers. They're both averaging 14 points per game, but the quality of talent on this team, this isn't the kind of Tom Izzo team that we've come to expect, and that's why I think they're very vulnerable, actually, in their matchup against number 5 Iowa. Again, I'm really big on Iowa. I think Fran McCaffrey is a really good coach. I think he knows how to press the buttons of his players, including a couple of sons that he has on the team. Iowa has 5 players that are scoring double digits, including Chris Murray, who's averaging 20.5 points per game. He is a star. He's got a brother in the NBA playing for the Sacramento Kings. But Chris Murray is emerging as a star in his own right in college basketball. Again, 20.5 points per game, 8 rebounds. He averages a steal, a block a game, and he can fill it up from the perimeter, averaging around 34.3 from deep. So a lot of reasons to like the Iowa offense in that game. Michigan State, what's their strength? They don't really have one. 137th in offensive rating, 172nd in defensive rating. They really don't have something that they hang their hat on. Meanwhile, Iowa, 15th in offensive rating this year. They average 80.6 points per game scored. That's 17th most in the country. I really like Iowa to fill it up against Michigan State and to advance into that semifinal round. The next game of the Big Ten tournament that we're going to break down on Friday is number 7 Illinois against number 2 Northwestern. This is one I'm a little bit concerned about, if I'm being honest, simply because I really like Illinois. I think they're a really deep team. I think they could be a good team in the overall NCAA tournament. But Northwestern has kind of been a darling this year. Their defense has been phenomenal for a number of reasons. I think that Illinois could have some trouble. How do they play against the big men down low of Northwestern? Northwestern generates a lot of steals. Northwestern, 34th in the country in defensive rating. They allow 62.3 points per game. That's 19th best in the country. So Northwestern, Chris Collins, he's building a real program at Northwestern. For years we talked about, Duke coach tries to go and turn Northwestern into Duke of the Midwest, but he's slowly doing that. Northwestern has been really good. They've had an unbelievable strength of schedule as well, 37th in the country. For Northwestern, that's incredibly high. And they've beaten Indiana twice. They beat Purdue at home when Purdue was number one in the country. They don't score a lot of points. They only have two scorers in double digits. Boo Buie is one of the most important players in the country to any individual team. He averages 17.2 points per game, 4.5 rebounds. He's really the offensive motor for the Northwestern Wildcats. If he doesn't get going, it definitely means that Northwestern is in trouble. But I just like the Northwestern defense. I think Illinois, I think they're going to cover, so I do like Illinois on a cover play. But Northwestern on an outright win, I'm leaning in that direction. I think Northwestern also getting the extra day of rest could benefit them as well. I think it's going to be a tight game. This is one where I could see it being a buzzer beater or a last second shot kind of situation, but I like Northwestern to squeak ahead. I would consider the under in that game. Obviously, we don't know what the line is. We have to get to that point, but given how the defense of Northwestern plays, I think it's a tighter, low-scoring game, so I'm going to have Northwestern advancing. That leaves one last game of that Friday slate for the Big Ten tournament. That's number 6 Maryland that we had advancing past Nebraska, facing number 3 Indiana. Now, the Indiana Hoosiers, they were projected or expected to be the number 1 team. They were expected to win the Big Ten regular season title, projected to at the beginning of the year. They didn't ultimately complete that, finished number 3rd in the Big Ten standings. And in part, that's because they struggled a little bit towards the end of the year. They got some clutch wins like their win on the road against Purdue, but then they lost against Iowa at home, a bad loss for them. Maryland, on the other hand, they've been up and down at times this year. They finished with back-to-back losses, as I mentioned a moment ago, both on the road, but they've won 4 of their last few games. So the question is, will Maryland feel the home court advantage of Indiana? Indiana always travels well, usually has kind of a home court advantage, that 65-35% advantage at neutral site games. So I do feel like the Indiana crowd will make a slight difference. I also think Trayce Jackson-Davis is not going to go out in the first game of the Big Ten tournament. He has been phenomenal this year. I think Trayce Jackson-Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino are 2 players to watch, not just in the Big Ten tournament, but throughout the month of March. They're both making their push to be NBA draft picks. I really like Indiana in this game. Think it's probably a little bit closer than a lot of Hoosier fans would like, but I like Indiana ultimately advancing in that one. That leaves just 4 teams left in the Big Ten tournament. Iowa facing Purdue, Indiana facing Northwestern. Let's break these 2 down. You can already tell I've been a big fan of Iowa. I love their team. I think they could be a team that could ultimately upset Purdue in this matchup, so I do like them on the spread. But Purdue is the juggernaut. They're the best team in the Big Ten. They've held that status throughout. I like Purdue in this game. Again, having the extra rest probably will serve them well. I don't think Iowa can match up well with Zach Edey. They certainly can match up on the outside with the guards and shooters of Purdue, but Zach Edey has a dominant advantage in the paint. I think in both rebounds and scoring in the paint. That's ultimately what's going to make the difference. I like this as a higher scoring game. So again, we have no idea what the total number will be coming out of Vegas, but I really like Purdue on the money line. I like Iowa to cover, and I like the over in this game if we get it. But I think this is going to be one of the most entertaining games of any conference tournament. That's Iowa and Purdue. If we get it, it would come on Saturday. The other game that would come on Saturday in the Big Ten tournament is Indiana facing Northwestern. This would be the 3rd matchup of these 2 teams. Crazy to say it, Northwestern has swept Indiana so far this year, winning both at home at Northwestern and at Assembly Hall in Bloomington. Northwestern seems to have Indiana's number, and the way they do it, they limit Trayce Jackson-Davis, they limit Jalen Hood-Schifino. There's only so much you can do to stop Trayce Jackson-Davis, but if you limit him to 15 points, it feels like a massive win. Northwestern's been able to do that at times, and Jalen Hood-Schifino has not played well against Northwestern, hasn't had the kind of shooting success he's had against other teams. So for a number of reasons, I'm leaning towards Northwestern. Indiana should be the better team on paper. Northwestern has clearly figured out how to play against the Hoosiers. Chris Collins has Mike Woodson's number, or at least he has this year. So I'm going to advance Northwestern. I know if you're a Northwestern fan, you can't believe I'm saying it, but I have Northwestern playing Purdue in the Big Ten Tournament Championship game. That'll be on Sunday, right before Selection Sunday, or before the selection show on CBS. That game, Purdue #1 against #2 Northwestern. So a bit of chalk here. I do like Purdue to ultimately win. Purdue lost to Northwestern in a game. Purdue traveled on the road, faced Northwestern at their place. Very tight game, came down to the final few seconds. Ultimately, Northwestern won. But I think Purdue's going to get their revenge in this game. I love Purdue, especially with what, again, Zach Edey can do. Tough matchup against Northwestern. So for a number of reasons, again, shooters outside, Matt Painter's coaching, Zach Edey, the most dominant player in the country, think he's going to own the glass. Don't think Northwestern's going to be able to contain him in the same way that they did in their previous matchup. So I have Purdue ultimately winning the Big Ten tournament. Make sure you follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. That's Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. And Sports Fumble on Twitter. TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, I should have said. TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find us at Butt Fumble Sports and Sports Fumble on Twitter. And of course, make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. Sign up for the free newsletter. It's going to have everything you need for March Madness. Comes out every Friday, so all of our picks for the weekend, including the teams that we think are going to get the top 4 seeds for the Selection Sunday Committee. Make sure you follow us. Hit that like button, subscribe, and of course, go to our website and sign up for that free newsletter. Now, let's transition to the Big 12 tournament. The next tournament we're going to cover is the Big 12 tournament, and the Big 12 has been an absolute juggernaut throughout the year. The best tournament, or the best conference rather, in the country. That used to belong to the Big 10 or the ACC. No longer. The Big 12 has been incredible this year. Highly competitive, and it's not the teams that we're always accustomed to. Perfect example is this in the first game of the Big 12 tournament. Number 9 Texas Tech will be playing number 8 West Virginia. That game is on Wednesday, tips off on Wednesday afternoon. Texas Tech, they're just not as good a team this year as they have been. They have a couple nice wins, but I like West Virginia. West Virginia is not the kind of press Virginia that we've become accustomed to. Texas Tech has a good strength of schedule just by being in the Big 12 tournament, but their offense, they have some depth. They have 5 scorers in double digits, but overall they're averaging 73.7 points per game, so they rely heavily on their starters, don't have a lot in terms of bench. For that reason, I like West Virginia. I think West Virginia's offense is just far more dynamic. West Virginia is averaging 76.7 points per game, 60th in the country. Obviously, Bob Huggins leading that team. They're a little bit deeper, maybe not in terms of scoring, but in terms of overall talent. I do like West Virginia to advance against Texas Tech in that first game of the Big 12 tournament. In the second game of the Big 12 tournament, that's on Wednesday, number 10 Oklahoma playing number 7 Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has taken the first 2 of this series during the regular season. That's the reason I'm going to advance Oklahoma State, give them the nod. So now we advance to the Thursday slate of games for the Big 12 tournament. This is the meteor day of this tournament. Number 4 Baylor facing number 5 Iowa State. This is a great matchup. Baylor has been one of the best teams at times in the country, but because of the challenges of the Big 12, they've suffered a couple tough losses. But Baylor, for me, is a team that I've got my eye on, not just in this conference tournament, but in March overall. I really like Scott Drew, obviously coming off a national championship a couple years ago. Strength of schedule, 4th in the country, 54th in points per game, 77.3. Really like what their offense can do, especially their big-time scorers, Keontae George, Adam Flagler, L.J. Cryer. All those guys are averaging 14 points or better, so you have 3 different guys who can fill it up. I like Baylor to advance in that game, beating Iowa State. Okay, next game, number 1 Kansas Jayhawks have won the regular season Big 12 title, and they face number 8 West Virginia, who we had advancing. I won't spend much time on this one. Kansas is outstanding this year. Jalen Wilson, maybe the best guard in the country, best ball handler in the country. He's been fantastic. Grady Dick, a good shooter from the outside. I like Kansas in that game. I like Kansas advancing against West Virginia. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game, so you might like the over in that matchup, but I do like Kansas to ultimately win. The next game we're going to focus on is number 2 Texas playing number 7 Oklahoma State, who we have advancing past that first round matchup against Oklahoma. Texas is 7th in the country in strength of schedule. Remember, they went through a coaching change early this year. Chris Beard, obviously off the court issues that, whether resolved or not, have taken him away from the Texas Longhorns. He's been replaced by Rodney Terry. Under Rodney Terry this year, the Longhorns are 16-7. They're 51st in offensive rating, 51st in defensive rating. So you can just hear a very balanced team, both sides of the floor. Scuffled a little bit late in the year. They beat Kansas in their last game, senior night at home. But prior to that, 2 losses on the road to Baylor and to TCU. But again, the Big 12 has been so competitive. Those losses to Baylor and to TCU, especially on the road, don't look so bad in the light of day, especially given the margin of defeat. The loss to TCU was a 2-point loss. Baylor was a little bit larger, 9 points. But I like Texas, not just in this game. Keep an eye on them. They're another team you want to highlight when the larger bracket comes out next week. The final game of the Thursday schedule for the Big 12 tournament is number 3 Kansas State against number 6 TCU. Keep an eye on the upset in this one. We haven't had too much. We've had a lot of chalk so far, not too many upsets. I really like Jamie Dixon. He's done a really good job with this TCU team. When it comes to strength of schedule, 34th in the country. Kansas State is 10th. Kansas State, good defensive team, generate a lot of steals, one of the better teams in the country when it comes to assists as well. 11th in the country in assists, averaging 16.9. They average 7.8 steals per game. That's good for 59th in the country. So you can just see a lot of active guard play from Kansas State. As for TCU, what's their real strength? Assisting as well. Distributing the basketball. They average 16.3 assists per game, 8.3 steals. So this is a battle of 2 teams that are well matched up against each other. Good guard play is what I expect from both. Mike Miles Jr., he is the star for TCU. If he's able to go off with a big scoring game, he averages 17.2 points per game. If he can have a big scoring game, I like TCU on the upset. I'm not going to pick that now. If I had to put my money down, I would take Kansas State, but it's one of those situations where I'll take Kansas State on the money line, I'll take TCU on the spread, but that spread could be a bit too tight for me. Depending on how tight it gets, I may take the underdog, but if it's 4.5 points or more, I will take TCU on the cover, Kansas State on the money line. The next game of the Big 12 tournament, as we move to the Friday matchups, is number 4 Baylor against number 1 Kansas. This is a mega showdown of 2 teams with a lot of star power that absolutely could be playing into the Elite 8 of the big tournament that follows next week. In earlier matchups, Baylor lost at Kansas 87-71 in a pretty, defining win for Kansas. Kansas needed it at the time. But that said, Baylor won at home against Kansas earlier. It was January 23rd, so almost a month earlier. They won by 6 points at home against Kansas. So a split between the 2 teams. I do like Kansas winning this game. They've evolved over the back half of the year. They've gotten better. Baylor's been good, especially the middle of the year. That January stretch, it really was like January 11th all the way to middle of February. They were really strong. Last 2 weeks, Baylor has had some disappointing losses. Kansas, Kansas State, and then Iowa State, the last game of the year, really disappointing. But that said, I like Baylor to advance. I like Kansas to advance. I like Kansas to beat Baylor. And Kansas will be playing in the Big 12 championship game. The question is, who will they be playing against? Number 2 Texas, number 3 Kansas State. We discussed how good Kansas State is at the guard position, assists, steals, but they are not nearly as good a team overall as Texas is. Texas, to me, is a Sweet 16 team at worst. They're really, I believe, an Elite Eight team. I think Texas is a team we're going to be talking about really late into the NCAA tournament. I think Kansas State will be competitive in the first half of this game. Ultimately, in the final 8 minutes, I think Texas's depth and quality of talent, not just at the guard position, but also at the big man position, forwards and centers. I think that's where it ultimately comes out. I like Texas to advance, setting up the ultimate mega matchup in the Big 12 tournament between number 2 Texas, number 1 Kansas. We just got this last weekend on Sunday. Texas ultimately came out the winner, but Kansas was then given the number 1 overall ranking by the AP poll. I think Kansas deserved that number 1 seed, and I think Kansas is going to show why. Texas had the benefit of being at home for that game. This is a neutral site. I like Kansas getting the win and Kansas winning the Big 12 tournament. Again, I have Kansas winning the Big 12 tournament. Make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. That's Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and Sports Fumble on Twitter. For all of those who love getting all of our content, make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. Check out our latest content every day, college basketball picks, NBA picks, parlay plays to make, also a lot of NFL news and everything else you will want. So check out buttfumblesports.com and sign up for our free newsletter that's available. It comes out every Friday morning with everything you need for the entire world of sports that upcoming weekend. We have one more conference tournament to go through. That's the SEC, the Southeastern Conference. Some good teams. It's a bit of a top-heavy conference this year, but I do love the competition, especially that we're going to get towards the final few games of the SEC tournament. So let's break it down. The SEC tournament first round tips off on Wednesday, and the first game is number 13 Ole Miss against number 12 South Carolina. To me, this is a bit of a coin flip. I like South Carolina just a little bit more, so I will push the Gamecocks through to the next round, but I think that will be their only win of the SEC tournament. I'm doing the same with number 11 Georgia against number 14 LSU. Georgia, not as good. They've obviously lost out on those marquee draft picks that they had a few years ago. The same quality of talent that was there isn't anymore. I like Georgia just to barely pass through. LSU has just been a disaster this year, but Georgia by a coin flip, I'll have them advancing. South Carolina and Georgia may make it through to Wednesday. I think it's the only wins they're going to get of the week. So feel good if you're a Gamecock or a Bulldog fan, but you can already start looking forward to the football season pretty soon. Okay, now the meteor day of the conference tournament, the second round, Thursday, number 9 Mississippi State against number 8 Florida. I have my eye on Florida. I'd be surprised if they got upset in this game for a number of reasons. I think they could actually do better than people think. I like Florida to advance in this game against Mississippi State. I think it's going to help their case for the NCAA tournament, move up to a better seed. I think they could be a dark horse to maybe make some noise in that first weekend, first round or two of the NCAA tournament. For them to get there, they're going to have to get this win against Mississippi State. Don't think it'll be a problem. I like the Gators in round 2 to advance. Okay, number 12, South Carolina against number 5, Tennessee. Tennessee has been one of the best defensive teams this season. Meanwhile, South Carolina gets the benefit of a terrible matchup in the first round, but I don't think South Carolina has any chance against the Volunteers. Tennessee is allowing 57.5 points per game, the third fewest in the country. When it comes to defensive rating, they're the best in the country. I really like Tennessee. I think they're going to cause a lot of problems for their opponents. I like Tennessee to advance against South Carolina. Eric Musselman and Arkansas play Bruce Pearl and number 7 Auburn in a matchup of teams I liked at the beginning of the year, don't feel as good about right now. Auburn at times was a hot team, an upset creator. They upset, they had a good game against Alabama just a couple days ago. And then obviously Arkansas, not as good as they have been in past years. Eric Musselman's a great coach, but not the quality of talent that he's had. Wasn't able to quite recruit and pull in some of the transfer portal players that he needed to stay competitive within the SEC this year. I like Auburn to advance. They're just a slightly better team. I like their shooting more as well. I like Auburn to advance. And then the final game of that second round is number 11 Georgia against number 6 Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt got a really big win a couple weeks ago against Kentucky. I thought that was a program-defining win as they started to get ready for the March Madness tournament. For that reason, I like Vanderbilt. I think they're obviously deeper and more talented than Georgia. But one of the things I also like about them, Jerry Stackhouse, he has them playing a better tempo. I love what they're doing right now in terms of trying to distribute, get some more depth on their team. A player I'd keep my eye on when it comes to three-point shooting is Liam Robbins. Liam Robbins averaging 36.5% from deep. Also keep your eye on Jordan Wright, averaging 34.7% from three-point range. I like Vanderbilt to advance in that game. Okay, next round, Friday of the SEC tournament. Number 8 Florida faces number 1 Alabama. Alabama has a number of issues floating around the program. Turbulence with their star player. We're not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. All I'll say is Alabama deserves to be a number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament, unless there's circumstances that give the committee reason to deny them that privilege. But I like Alabama in this game. Florida, if they were able to pull off the upset, it would go a massive way in making their case for March. But Alabama is the better team. They have not just the best player, they have the better coach. They're the deeper team. I love Alabama in this one to advance. Number 5, Tennessee against number 4, Missouri. Missouri has kind of snuck up on me a little bit. I haven't been paying attention to them for much of the year. Not a team that I really had my eye on. Strength of schedule, 68th in the country. They are 21st in points per game, 80.1 points per game. Dennis Gates has done a really good job with this team. They're 4th in the SEC, so it tells you how well they've played. Like I said, averaging 80 points per game. How do they get it? A lot of depth. Yeah, they only have 3 scorers who are averaging double digits, but they have, 7 players who have at least 7 points per game or more. So the depth of Missouri has me a bit concerned. But Tennessee's defense, what do we say about defense? It travels. I love it at a neutral site. I like Tennessee advancing, pulling off this slight upset over number 4 Missouri in the SEC tournament. Tennessee advancing. The next matchup we're going to talk about is number 7 Auburn against number 2 Texas A&M. I mentioned a moment ago that Missouri kind of snuck up on me. Texas A&M has had a similar surprising climb up the rankings for me. Buzz Williams, every time you turn around, he's at a new program succeeding. They are 15-3 within the conference, 2nd in the SEC. What do they really do well? They kind of hang their hat on their defense. They average 65.6 points allowed per game, 81st in defensive rating, 68th in offensive rating. So it's kind of strange. They don't score as many points as you think, but their efficiency adds to the quality of their offensive rating. When it comes to their scorers, again, depth is what you're going for, but it's really, again, about their defense. Wade Taylor, their top scorer, averaging 16.3 points per game. Tyrese Radford, 13.3. Then it falls off a bit, but they get scoring from inside and out. So I like Texas A&M, but not as much as I like Auburn. I think Auburn pulls off the big upset. Number 7 taking down number 2 in the tournament. I like Auburn pulling off the upset. Texas A&M is a one-and-doner for me in the SEC tournament. And finally, the last game of this round of the SEC tournament is number 6 Vanderbilt against number 3 Kentucky. We saw this matchup not too long ago. Vanderbilt went into Rupp Arena and pulled off the upset, beating Kentucky. I think John Calipari, has had this game circled ever since. That was just a 2-point win for Vanderbilt. I don't expect it to be as close this time. I like Kentucky to win that game and win it comfortably. Kentucky advancing to the next round of the SEC tournament. Moving on to the Saturday games in the SEC tournament, the semifinals. Number 5 Tennessee against number 1 Alabama. We've seen these teams play earlier this year, pulling up how they did in those matchups. Tennessee beat Alabama at home 68-59 in an incredibly low-scoring game. Alabama, that's a good offensive team, really struggled in that one. Don't think it's going to be the same situation given this game is on a neutral court. I like Alabama to advance. I think they will figure out how to beat the Tennessee defense just enough to squeak out a win. I think it's going to be a close game, so I could see Tennessee covering, but I do like Alabama winning and advancing to the SEC championship game. The next game in the semifinal round is number 7 Auburn against number 3 Kentucky. Now, Kentucky beat Auburn just a few weeks ago, 86-54, really a beatdown in that game. That game kind of sticks out in my mind. I know it was at Kentucky, at Rupp Arena, but that was a wide margin of victory, really controlled the game throughout. When it comes to turnovers, Auburn only had 10 turnovers, or had 12 turnovers, only caused 10. So the turnover differential wasn't the real difference. 3-point shooting was the difference. Kentucky 61% from 3-point range, 8 of 13 from 3-point range. That was ultimately the difference. I think Kentucky's going to continue to beat Auburn in just that way. I think they figured something out. I like Kentucky to advance, setting up a mega matchup of number one Alabama against number 3 Kentucky in the SEC tournament. And I'm going to go with the upset on this one. I'm going to go with Kentucky. Kentucky never played Alabama early this year and lost. It was at Alabama, a bit of a beatdown, but that was much earlier in the year. Since then, John Calipari has worked through some things with his team. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. The only loss they had, I mentioned, was that 2-point loss to Vanderbilt. I think Kentucky has figured something out over the last month and a half. I like Kentucky to ultimately win this game. Think it will knock Alabama out of a number 1 overall seed for the NCAA tournament. Think they could still get a number 1 regional seed, but I think Kentucky will win the SEC tournament, which will vault them into a discussion of whether they're a number 4 or number 5 seed overall. Those were our picks for the Big 12, Big 10, and SEC tournaments. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Fumble Sports, and of course on Twitter at Sports Fumble. If you have questions, want to engage with us, share your picks, never hesitate. Reach out to us on our channels. One more time, that's Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and Sports Fumble on Twitter. Of course, go to our website as well, buttfumblesports.com. Sign up for our free newsletter. It comes out every Friday morning with all of our picks and plays for the weekend, as well as all of our game notes and gambling trends. That way, whether you agree with us or disagree, we try to make you smarter to cash in on your weekend sports betting action. Make sure you follow us. That way you know every time we go live. We'll be doing a lot of brackets as they come out, not just for conference tournaments, but of course for the NCAA tournament. Selection Sunday just a few days away. Make sure you subscribe to your YouTube channel, to our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to our TikTok channel. That way you know every time we go live, we're going to be breaking down every region, every game. You won't want to miss it, so make sure you subscribe to Fumble Sports. Appreciate you joining us. Have a wonderful day.